Welcome back to Close Up on San Diego Business, where we get up close and personal with San Diego businesses and the key people that are working hard to make a difference in our community. I'm your host, Barry Waxler, here on KFSD AM 1450 and financialnewsandtalk.com. Okay, we're back. Have another very special guest. We have Miss Janet Sobel, and her company is Counseling at Law. Welcome, Janet.
Thank you.
Great.
Glad to be here.
Great. Well, we appreciate you coming, and you have a unique practice because most attorneys go after the biggest fish they can find, and that's not your game, is it?
Not anymore. When I started practicing law after going to UCLA Law School and finishing near the top of my class, I was able to get a job with a law firm just like that.
Uh-huh.
And then almost from the beginning of practicing law, I realized there had to be something better to do than that. And so I moved to a mid-sized law firm, and then I started up a two-person law firm, and then finally I decided that I would hang that up and just try to help people with individual smaller problems.
Right. Well, you know what? I mean, the first thing that comes to mind when I look at your business card, it says start with sensible and affordable legal advice. That almost sounds like an oxymoron in itself, okay? Because most attorneys won't promote, the affordable legal advice. So tell us a little bit more about what you do and how you do it.
Well, my counseling at law practice essentially is, and I get a lot of referrals from mediation centers and also from lawyers. I try to help people to understand what their legal problem is, what options they have, what the law would be. I take a look at their documents, and I try to advise them about what the law would say about their problem. People often have a very unrealistic view of what their legal problem is, and they need guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I come across a problem that is like a really big situation that the client didn't even appreciate, and if I can't get the other side to be interested in mediation, then I refer them over to a lawyer, and I help the client interview the lawyers, and I help explain to the client what will be involved, because not all lawyers explain things very well.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I noticed about the legal field some years ago that I think is really true in what you're saying is that, like doctors and medicine, everything's become specialized, and attorneys, there just aren't that many there's not that much general practice in law. It's all specialized now, isn't it?
Well, it's been driven in that direction because the law is so huge.
Right.
And I think that sometimes the biggest trap for lawyers is what they don't know.
Right.
And so there are malpractice traps everywhere. So lawyers try to get a handle on some smaller segment of the law so that their legal advice is competent. I am always calling other lawyers and telling them, what are the bankruptcy implications of this, for example. But yeah, absolutely. And
it's interesting because it's almost as though the legal industry has changed because we're such a litigious society. So now it's almost as though attorneys are kind of on the receiving end of that aspect of our society now, right? And it's really changed the practice of it.
I think that one of the things that's in my book, which has been kind of the culmination of 30 years of my own experience, is that a lot more malpractice is committed out there than clients ever know.
Right.
That it is a very simple matter for a lawyer to cover over a mistake, and that for a client to figure out why suddenly he gets a phone call that says the court just threw out your case, I mean, the client can be like, what happened? And one of the statistics that's in my book that I personally find very interesting is that 19% of California lawyers have either a drug or alcohol abuse problem, or they're having a nervous breakdown.
Wow.
And that's 1 in 5, and I can guarantee you there is no tattoo on the forehead, and there is no sign on the door, and clients are walking in all the time hiring those lawyers. And if you read the disciplinary section of the California Bar Magazine each month, you can see that, there's a lot of wrongdoing out there, and the opportunity to have it made right is is very
So,
slim.
so you focus a lot on education in your practice, not just education to the client as far as how the legal system works for them, but you're going to educate them in how to find the best lawyer in case that's not something that you specialize in. Am I correct?
Yeah, that is right. And one of the things that my book talks about is how difficult it is and how to go about figuring out whether you have been the victim of legal malpractice.
Right.
And it really involves understanding what the whole legal system is all about.
Well, let's tell everybody about the book.
Yeah.
It's called Litigation, Insult to Injury, What Judges and Lawyers Know About the Legal System That You Don't. And, this thing probably weighs about 3 pounds, Miss Janet, because there's a whole lot that people don't know.
There is a whole lot that people don't know, and clients and consumers of legal services, even the sophisticated ones that have successful businesses, really do not have any understanding beyond the most basic of what is going to happen once they get into the legal system. Lawyers are quick to sign people up and sadly quick to take their money, but the client is just in the dark. And my book is intended to turn on the light.
That's great. You're listening to Close Up on San Diego Business here on KFSD AM 1450 and financialnewsandtalk.com. I'm your host, Barry Waxler, here with co-hosts Andrea Kay and Al Arias, and our guest is Janet Sobel from Counseling at Law. Janet, who is this book targeting? Who should be reading your book?
That book should be read by, in my view, every person who is anticipating or contemplating getting into a lawsuit on either side of the courtroom. Because it will allow them to understand what is going to be going on and to ask the right questions of their lawyers. To me, law students should be reading this book. In fact, I've had a couple of law professors tell me that they're thinking of having it be a textbook in the classroom.
Wow.
Mediators, so that mediators can very intelligently warn their participants of what might be waiting for them if they dig in and take a hard line.
Right.
Mental health professionals. There's actually a form of PTSD called legal abuse syndrome. And in fact, the foreword to my book is written by a mental health professional who talks about how people have been traumatized by the legal system. My book explains why.
Well, I'm one of the fortunate ones because you brought me a copy of the book. But our listeners need to know, how do they get a copy of your book?
Well, I would be delighted if they would either go onto Amazon and search for Litigation, Insult to Injury, or they can go onto my website, which is judgingthelaw.com, where they can order the book. They can also get a great set of links for doing their own research into the law if they're interested in knowing more about it, and they can contact me. I would love to be invited to speak at groups and spread this word.
So you're available for speaking engagements.
Speaking engagements, and also to be retained by somebody if they want me to take a look at what's going on in their litigation.
And I'm not sure we really tapped into this, but you really focus on the small case. Am I correct?
That's right, because I do not litigate. I gave that up about 14 years ago after feeling as though I was part of the problem instead of part of the solution. And so I offer my legal services for consultation at only $100 an hour, even though with 30 years experience, if I had a regular practice, I'd be charging $400 an hour. And people whose problems $15,000, $20,000, many lawyers won't even open up a file. I had a woman tell me that she talked to 20 lawyers and not one of them would take her case because it didn't justify having a lawyer, and she called me crying. And I, of course, helped her, and it was a good outcome.
That's great.
Excellent.
That's great. Well, what I like about your practice is, being an attorney and having 30 years experience, you not only know the business, but you know the industry and you know who's out there and who can really do a good job for clients. So when somebody comes to you, they could come to you knowing full well that they need a big, powerful law firm or they need somebody other than you, but you can give them the guidance at a reasonable rate that they wouldn't get if they walked into the big firm.
Absolutely. Sometimes when I've had a client, I've had to go and interview lawyers maybe 6 times with them and listening to what the answers are, and then over coffee consulting with the client about what gave me concern and why I think or didn't think this would be a good choice.
Do you ever meet any resistance? Because we've got some big, powerful firms here in San Diego.
I have not. I think that
Good to
the
know.
testimonials for my book have endorsements from all across the spectrum: retired judges, lawyers, law students, consumers, mediators.
Great.
Everybody seems to agree with what's in that book, but nobody takes the time to tell it to the client.
Wow. That's great. So when somebody comes to you, they find, let's call it either legal representation or personal representation that will help them find legal representation. Is that a good way to phrase it?
That is exactly right. One would think that you had a lot of personal experience.
No.
Well,
No.
fortunately, Barry, you only got 2 minutes left before break.
Fortunately, 2 minutes to get out of trouble here.
Exactly.
So yeah, maybe I need to hire Janet to get me to the break.
She'll negotiate it for you.
That's right.
So this is great. The legal liaison. Before we go to break, any great stories from your career?
Well, I am still friends for 27 years with one of my first clients, which was a young Navy guy whose the grandparents tried to take his daughter away from him without him being served with notice after his wife had passed away. The grandparents went to a lawyer and he said, "This is how we do it." And I scrambled around and got him not only his daughter back, but we sued them for malicious prosecution, and he's living in the house that he got from that.
Wow.
That's great.
Oh, what a happy ending. So
Yep.
from really something very difficult to something really victorious on the other end.
Totally.
Malicious prosecution, that is a real difficult one to
Yeah, it
stick.
is.
That's
So,
right. And
that
I
was
So
have,
you just look sweet, right?
that's right. Exactly.
That's
Awesome.
interesting.
I think we're going to have to leave it there.
Yeah.
She just
So-
looks sweet.
Yeah.
So in closing, before we go to break, tell our listeners one more time how they get a hold of you.
Go to my website, judgingthelaw.com. You'll find an interesting blog too. I posted one today. You can watch a short video and get a good laugh. You can contact me or buy my book.
Great. Well, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
So you're listening to Close Up on San Diego Business here on KFSD AM 1450 and financialnewsandtalk.com. I'm your host, Barry Waxler, here with my co-hosts, Andrea Kay and Al Arias, and we'll be right back after the break with Mr. Chris Shaw from Moe's Universe.